Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode number 18 of What's on Your Workbench. That's right. We are back for yet another episode of the most wonderful podcast you've ever heard of. It's Two Men Explore Their Feelings. No, that's not it.
Not this time,
Australia, US, what's the difference?
No.
What's on your workbench? That's it. I am Chili from Morewood Solutions. With me, as always, is my friend from Australia, Andy. Andrea, how are you doing today?
I am doing good. My workbench is an absolute mess, which is again the reason why I had this podcast, because I think I've got about 4 different projects spread out all over, and I'm not even going to be talking about any that are sitting on the workbench. There's actually one down here somewhere, but I am doing good, enjoying my workbench, enjoying my workshop. I don't know, I was out here last night just puttering away, and it was just like, yep, this is my happy spot. I like doing this. It's nice being in the craft room with the wife working on stuff, but it's nice I've got a TV set up over here so I can put a YouTube on and just work away out in the shed, and works out good. But nice. I guess let's just jump straight into it. So what is on your workbench this week?
Well, we talked a little bit last time about this frame that is the upper part of a really old bureau that I have some work to do on. And so I started that work on the back side of it. And it wasn't really anything super incredibly earth-shattering, but it involved a process that I don't think a lot of people know about or are familiar with. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about.
1 second. When you say bureau, what can you describe that? I think I know what you mean, but
well, it's actually not really a bureau. It's technically a small buffet.
Okay.
But it's a cabinet. The center cabinet has 2 doors and a couple of drawers as well around it. And then on top there is this piece that has a shelf and holds a mirror. So it goes in a like breakfast nook or dining.
Okay.
Like
and you normally put like dining sets or spare cutlery or tablecloth, stuff like that in it.
Yeah, liquor cabinet, whatever.
Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just a bit because we've got something similar in our house, and we call it our white cupboard, and it's neither white nor a cupboard. So
it's not quite a sideboard. A sideboard is usually pretty long and low. I believe the generally accepted term for it would be a buffet.
Okay.
But it is smaller. It's very petite for a buffet, and really is kind of almost the size of a bureau, which is like a small chest of drawers, usually in a bedroom setting.
Okay.
But I started work on bringing some new life to this. It is solid oak that is about it's at least 100 years old. It's been around a long time in my family. We have the matching table for it in our breakfast nook, but this one is going to be in our dining room and go with the oak table that I've made for that space. And the first thing I did was the back side of this. I took the mirror out and I was looking at the back side of this, and over the years, at some point, someone decided to touch up the back with black spray paint.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the best method for furniture restoration. the old rattle can. So I wanted to, this is something that nobody will ever see. It's going to go against the wall, and it has absolutely no importance whatsoever. But it was driving me nuts as a craftsman, and I wanted to take it back to some traditional techniques of doing this. So I sanded it all down with some 80 grit, stripped everything off, then moved to 120 and up to 220, to get it smoothed out and down to bare raw oak. And then from there, I needed to make it black again. So I used a process called ebonizing. And ebonizing is a pretty old technique to blacken wood. And it really came into prevalence for a while in the early like Depression era, really, when ebony wood was really hard to get. And so piano makers would use it for the black keys instead of using actual ebony wood for the black keys.
Yeah, because
They
ebony's
use
a
this
really
ebonizing process.
ebony's a really dark black wood, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And traditionally, you know, the keys on a piano were legitimately clad in ivory for the white keys, and it was ebony wood for the black keys. Nowadays, it's whatever, you know, cheap wood, basswood, poplar, whatever, and they're just coated, you know, in a lacquer or whatever. But so in order to ebonize this, what I had to do is I had to get it down to bare wood first. And then what I'm trying to do is create a chemical reaction with the tannic acid that's found in wood. And you can do this process with just about any wood, but different wood species vary in how much tannic acid they have naturally. Oak happens to have a lot of tannic acid in it, so I don't have to do anything to it before I put this treatment on it. But for some woods, like if I was going to do this on poplar, let's say, poplar doesn't have much tannic acid. So I would have to introduce some tannic acid to the wood first. And you can get pure, you know, tannic acid powder and create a solution to brush on. You can also do things like use tea leaves or some other organic compounds that do have tannic acid in them to create a brew to brush on first. But no matter what you have, whether it's raw wood like this, oak, or it's another kind of wood that you've introduced some tannic acid to, you then have to use a catalyst to create this ebonizing effect. And this catalyst is super simple. There's only two things in this jar.
Let me guess.
There is
vinegar,
a bunch,
and steel wool.
vinegar and what?
Steel wool.
Yep, you got it. Just a pad of steel wool and some vinegar. And what's really funny is what you're actually doing in this process is rusting. That's really what you're doing is you're rusting the wood essentially. But it's that rust reaction with tannic acid that creates a rich, dark black color. So this takes really like a couple minutes, and it starts working. But it's best if you let it sit for a while, like I have. This one has been sitting for a couple of months actually, and there is nothing left of the steel wool. It is completely dissolved. I don't even have to shake it anymore. Like it is suspended. It's great. And then all I do is take a foam applicator brush and brush this on to the oak, and it immediately starts turning darker. And it will turn kind of a really dark brown initially. And then if you set it back, you know, set it to the side, come back to it in like 5-10 minutes, it's black, like jet black. And it doesn't, doing it with the oak, since the tannic acid is in the wood, I don't even have like really a film or anything on the outside. It's almost like a stain. And you can still see the wood grain, which is really cool. Like it's just a really fun process to get this really good, deep, rich black tone in wood. So it's super, super stupidly easy. It's one of the reasons I love it. Two, It is kind of forgotten. There's not a lot of applications of this that you'll see, which is why I love it too, is keeping these old things alive. And the third thing I really love about it is that it's super, super easy to finish over. So if I wasn't doing this on the backside of this piece, and I wanted to use this as a decorative element in something I'm doing, I can use the same finish, top layer that I do over the rest of the project. So if that's a, oil varnish blend or a paste wax, whatever I'm doing for my finish, I can do the same finish over this and it will be just fine.
Yeah, no, it's an awesome technique. It's also point number 4 is it is cheap. It's basically costs nothing. I actually came across this when I was getting back into making, and I was actually in North Dakota at the time, and I didn't have a workshop, and my wife disappeared for a couple of days. I think she went down to Mount Rushmore with a friend or something, and I had the house to myself, which is actually quite rare. And I decided I was going to make, I don't know if you've ever seen a movie like a Tarzan movie. You know how whenever they go on safari, they have these big crates that look really cool, and that's how they take all their tents and all their supplies. And I was like, oh, I really like that aesthetics. I was like, I'm going to make some boxes to put under my bed, our double bed or a queen bed that we have. So I made up these boxes, and I was like, oh, this is going to cost like, $30 in stain and all these other, like, just to stain it kind of thing. And I was like, oh, I wonder what options are out there. And I actually came across the same one. Now I was just doing it to pine. And so I ended up treating it with the tea ointment or whatever. That's like, basically you just get cold tea that you've left overnight and wipe that on and let that soak in. And and you add that still wool vinegar mix, and that one's got a real nice rich brown to it that turned out really good, and it gives it a real antique kind of look to it. And like you said, compared to a stain, the application is really easy, and it's just like you said, it's a really fulfilling process to be able to do. And I've done it a few times since, but I've never had the same effect. I don't think I quite had the same setup. Like you said, you've got to leave that vinegar and still wool mix sit for a long time. Just trying to do it overnight, it still doesn't really dissolve, and you'll get bits of steel wool stuck in your wood and things like that. But yeah, no, it's a great. When you said ebonizing, I'm like, oh, I don't think I've ever heard of this process. And then as you're describing, I'm like, oh, I think I have heard of this one. So yeah, it's great.
What I really love is so when you use like tea or another organic matter like that to add tannic acid to a wood, it's a little more difficult to control. You can get a decent looking project out of it for sure. But one of the really nice things about getting some pure tannic acid in powder form and creating a solution is you can really control how dark you want your wood to go. And you can create those nice chocolatey tones. If you do a weaker solution, or if you do a real strong solution, you can get that jet black. That's really cool. When you're at the mercy of, the acid in the wood, it's, it is what it is. There's not much you can really do about that. But when you're playing with a wood that has a low tannic acid, you can really kind of play around with that solution you make to get the look exactly that you want.
Yeah, but it's like you said, it's just like magic when you put that mixture on and you're just like, oh yeah, that looks kind of cool, and then it reacts and you're like, whoa. And that's like, I really didn't know what I was doing when I made those boxes, but to this day it looks like exactly what I wanted, kind of more of a rustic rustic crate looking color, and still looks good to this day. And I don't even think I varnished that. I think I just left it raw, and haven't even that's been fine. So it's inside, so it should be fine. But yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of similar in some ways aesthetically to a sanshugiban technique, which is Japanese wood burning.
Yep.
The difference really is that sanshugiban has a protective quality to it. because it does pull out the sugars in the wood to create a hard seal on the wood surface, where this doesn't. This doesn't really have a protective value in and of itself. It's purely aesthetic. But you can get really similar looks out of them, especially if you have some unique grain structure in your wood, and like maybe you have some combination of end grain and long grain showing on the face that absorbs this solution differently, so you'll get a varied level of darkness across that face of wood, which is really cool.
Yeah. So it's a very good alternative to a stain if you don't want to leave something the original color, and stains can get expensive. And we've already discussed stain and your opinion of stains.
Yeah, I'm a little snobby about that. Sorry. So yeah, I don't have anything terribly exciting on my workbench, but it's just a fun little thing that I would love for more people to know about, because it is a really cool technique.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that being said, Andrew, what shenanigans have you been getting up to on your workbench?
Well, the joys of making things yourself and not making a lot of them means you're not very good at making it. So you spend a lot of effort making something, and then it doesn't always work out. But because you're so busy making other things that aren't really that good, you never go back and fix the original thing that you made. So I've got a project that I made 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and I really enjoyed the process. But right at the end, it just wasn't working. And I just was like, no, it's good enough. I'm going to put it away, and one day I'll get around to fixing it. And I think a couple months after that, I pulled it out, tried to fix it, made a hash of it, and then put it away. And it's been sitting on my shelf for like the last couple years, and I've just kind of been thinking about it. Okay, what do I need to do? And I kind of came up with the decision that I'm going to have to rip it apart, start again. Not quite that drastic, but had to do quite a bit of work to it. So, of course, I am talking about my Newt Scamander suitcase. So, on my channel, my YouTube channel, a few years ago, it must be like 3-4 years ago, I made a suitcase. I was inspired by watching the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. A bit of a Harry Potter fan, being the millennial that I am, and I fell in love with the suitcase. Now, I kind of am a sucker for old suitcases and old doctor's bags and things like that. And when I saw the beautiful leather suitcase that's in that movie, I just had to have one. And so I diligently did my research, and I found another person who had replicated it on the RPF, the Replica Prop Forum, and he'd done such a great job. I was just watching the in progress pictures, and I just went, yep, I'm done. I've got to go do it. So I went and bought all the leather, stained all the leather, and got the dimensions and made the case. But the problem was that the build I was following was all leather. So you can see that it's a leather case, and it had no internal structure. The actual movie props were rumored to basically have like a carbon fiber frame inside them to give them rigidity. The build that I was following, he just kind of used the leather. And what you'll notice is that with the catches, so I've got catches on it like a musical instrument kind of catch, and it's got quite a strong spring on it. And so when I finished making it, I really had a lot of issues getting it to shut. And I couldn't push on it because the case would just flex every time you tried to put in the catch. Now, the guy who was following, what he did is he actually pulled out the spring, modified the spring to have less tension so that it was easier. You didn't have to force it as much. Now, I didn't want to do that, and so I bent it, and things got bent, and it just became a mess. And it got to the point where I couldn't really even shut it and have it be shut without it just popping open. And it kind of really frustrated me because it's a prop that I made, And I've worn it to a one Comic-Con event just to like dressed up as Newt Scamander because that's what I do. And and I ended up, it's funny because in the movie the case keeps opening and creatures keep escaping, and he has to, at the end, he ties it up with string. So when I went to this convention, I actually had string tied it up shut because I'm like, well, I have the same problem, so I'm just going to tie it up and, you know, canon. But yeah, and so it's been annoying me for a long time because I love it just sitting there and being able to look at, but I wish I could use it because nothing just tickles my cockles more than getting off an airport and picking up my case or pulling it out of a car, or, you know, just being able to use something practical. Like I go out to the field sometimes, like in the oil field, and to just show up with a case like this, I think that would be hilarious because that's just the kind of thing that I do. So anyway, I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to fix this catch issue. So first things first, I went and bought a new catch. I tried to buy two, but apparently I only bought one because they're really expensive. And they're actually surprisingly difficult to find. Apparently there's not a lot of custom luggage makers out there that sell you all the parts. They're out there, obviously, but yeah, it was a little bit of a trick to find them, but I found some on eBay. And so what I ended up doing, so you can see now that it is quite, you know, I've got it locked at the moment and it won't open up, but let's see if we can unlock it and it'll open. And so for those that you can see, it has got custom printed fabric on the inside to match the movie prop. But you can see here on the top that it's flexible, right? So it's got a wooden frame around the edge. So that gives me nice rigidity at the top, but I obviously didn't have that in the base. So what I've been doing on the last couple of weeks is I've been adding a wood frame on the inside. And what I also did is add an extra compartment here so that I can pop this out. Hard doing this one-handed. And there's actually a divider now. So when I'm pushing on it, I've got some real nice structural strength rather than just relying on the flex in that plywood, because I didn't want to make it heavy. I knew adding the plywood would add weight, and it's definitely, you know, heavier than what it was. So I wanted to go as thin as what I had, and I wanted to go as cheap as what I had. So what I had lying around, I think, was some 4mm ply. So I threw that in there, and it worked quite well. But to do that, I had to. I've got stitching all around the top edge. So around here, there was hand stitched. So I had to pop all that off, take the inner fabric out, redo the fabric because I'd made a mess of it anyway, build the inside wooden box, put the box inside, and then obviously put all the fabric back in. And I've still got to do all the final hand sewing. So you can see the holes maybe along there. So I've got to hand sew all of that shut again. But yeah, and then it'll be complete again. So that has been what I've been working on. Yeah, so it's definitely one of those ones where you take something that was super fun to build. It was a really great experience. I think it's one of my most viewed videos on YouTube. And then right at the end, it kind of fell apart because I couldn't actually use it the way I wanted to. And it just kind of annoyed me. So eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And when I'm working on all these other projects, it's really hard to justify going back in and working on something that I've already spent all this time on. But then on the other hand, I've already spent all this time on it. I might as well do it properly. And I guess doing things like that has really taught me that, you know, when you're working on it the first time, make it as good as you want to make it. Don't just call it good and move on. Obviously, this case is a bit different because I was more doing it for the aesthetic reason, and then I kind of wanted the more practical later. But either way, I'm now getting close to finishing it. I'm hoping to finish it off this weekend with that hand stitching, because that'll take me probably about 4 or 5 hours by the time I hand sew that all around. But yeah.
What I'm curious, what did you use for the fasteners to attach those latches to the case?
They are just leather rivets that you just pop together. They're nothing special. They're actually a mishmash of whatever I had lying around in my leather box, because this was one of the first, I know this would be my second biggest leather project. I did gladiator armor that was all leather as well. And then now I've done a bunch of other little leather projects around here and there. And so I've collected a lot of those little rivets that you just kind of pop together. And realistically, I should have gone through and found proper ones and bought a whole set of new ones, but I really just wanted it done. And I figure for this kind of case, it can be a little bit rustic. It can look a little patched here and there. And I find that they are quite strong, as long as you've got the right sizing on them. If you go too short for the area, like if you're trying to get a nice thick area and you've got too short, then you won't get a nice finish to it. And in a couple areas, I actually found that if you took the end of one of those rivets and you took a pop rivet, you could actually fit it in. And when you pop the pop rivet, if it was a good fit, it would actually expand, and that was actually super, super tight. So for things where it was hidden by the fabric on the inside, I could get away with doing that. But elsewhere, I had to just kind of mishmash what I had to make it work.
So you're talking about, just for the sake of clarity, you're talking about using like brass 2-part rivets.
Yep.
That you have a die and a hammer.
Yep.
And strike them to. Okay.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so this was actually where I've learnt about this other style of rivet, which is these ones here. And they're a copper, and they've basically got like a tapered cone, and the other one is it's like a washer, and you basically just force it on, and then you can trim off the edge or sand it or whatever you need to do. And those are like, yeah, once you've got them on, they're never coming off. And those ones I actually really liked using, but they were only accurate in a few spots, so I couldn't use them everywhere. But the other thing I did is actually use some, I actually changed out the back here. So previously this was just the hinge section was just put in the leather. So obviously the leather flex and the hinge flexes. And I wanted to structurally secure that. So I actually used screws, and I screwed the hinge directly into the wood frame of the lid. And then I actually ended up adding bits of metal. I had some kind of thick aluminum grade or aircraft grade aluminum. And I made little extensions for the hinges. You can't really see, because I didn't want the wood coming all the way to the top, because then it would be really thick. So I wanted the wood to kind of end, then have like the fabric leather section, and then have the lip. And so with the hinges were right up against the top of the lip of the suitcase. So I wanted a little piece of metal to extend it up. So I had all the strength of the wood without having that chunkiness going up. If I'd planned it better, I could have maybe just cut some wood up on that. But I just pop riveted in some sheets of this aircraft grade aluminum that I'd bought for another project, and it was actually too stiff for me to bend, which is what I had bought it for, because I'd bought a whole bunch of different grades because I wasn't sure what I needed. Different project. And so I had some left over, and I could easily just cut it up, and I pop riveted in, and now it's super strong. Because I had some issues where on the previous case, you would open the lid, and because again the leather was so flexible, the back would pop in, and then the lid would flop around, and it just wasn't working for me. So that's and I'm quite happy with now. It's still not perfect, but I'm hoping over time it will kind of loosen up. But I can at least get it shut now, and it'll stay shut. And especially with the ability to lock it, I'm not worried about somebody just brushing it and popping open, which I was previously.
Yeah, a while ago I found a phenomenal tool for helping with rivets. I was building, I was doing some extensive work on a boat, doing a complete gut and replacing the interior on a 75 Cobalt. And I made a new cover for it, cockpit cover and bow cover, and that all snaps down into place. And so the male end of the snaps were super easy because those have a screw that go through them, to go down into the hull. But the snaps on the fabric work the same as a two-piece rivet.
Yep.
You put them in, put it on the die, hammer it. Well, that was like, I don't know, like 200 some rivets. And after about 20 of them, I was really sick of that. And I was looking around, and I happened to find, when I was looking for more snaps, I found this awesome clamp that it's almost like a C clamp with a vice grip handle.
Oh, yep.
You can adjust to the right, to the right pressure. You put your piece together, put this clamp on it, and just squeeze the handle tight like on a vice grip, and it's the perfect tension every time. And I whip those snaps out so fast. And it came with a bunch of other kind of pieces to go on the jaws.
Yep.
So I've done two-piece rivets with it, and one of the best things I've ever invested in.
Yeah, I've got a cheap one, and I actually use it so much the handles have actually bent, so it's actually hard to. I've got to kind of bend it up each time to get it to work. So yeah, no, it's one of those tools that I'm looking at and go, yeah, if I ever do some more serious leather work, I'll be getting a replacement for that, because yeah, having to hammer it's always good to have the option to hammer, because sometimes you're working in odd angles and not being tied to that C kind of architecture, it does help. But yeah, no, it's definitely helps a lot. And that's this was actually a great project to learn about all different types of rivets, because then there's furniture rivets that just basically go into wood. There's just like split pin kind of ones that are the feet. So it's basically got almost every different type of rivet that I'm aware of built into it. So it's, yeah, and I just, who doesn't love the look of that? Oh, so good. It's definitely
looks really good. I like that.
It's definitely one of my favorite pieces that I've made. So yeah, that's why I'm like, I just want to be able to use it. It's got to be able to use.
I kind of laugh because I don't rivet a lot. I don't have a huge need for that very often, so I don't use that clamp with a lot of frequency. But it's one of the nicest tools I've ever purchased. But I'm going to be real glad I have it.
You start looking for projects when you're like, I've got this tool. Wonder what else I could do.
Well, in the not too distant future, I'm definitely gonna need it for another cover, kind of similar to what I did on that boat. I'm gonna be real glad I have it then.
Yeah, I guess the other fastening that wasn't originally used on this, but I ended up using it, is a Chicago screw. I think I'm not sure if you're used to calling it that. That's kind of what I know it as. And yeah, basically that's just a bolt, but it looks like a rivet, and you can screw it in and get a nice time. So I actually used them as well. Previously that was all just double-sided riveted together, but I wanted that strength and knowledge that I can tighten up on it and get it tight. So I ended up using that as well on the hinges. And yeah, so it works a lot better. I've still, like I said, got a little bit of time just to kind of do that hand sewing shut. But yeah, overall, I'm quite happy with that. Now I've got something I can use, so I'll be able to store some stuff in that, which will be good. I do need to clean up a little bit of it, because apparently I used spray paint in the shed while I was had this out somewhere, so it's got a bit of spray paint on it that I need to just kind of clean off. But it's leather, so all I need to do is take a bit of white sandpaper to it or steel wool, and then I can just re-stain it and buff it out, and it'll be fine. But nice. Yeah, so if people want to find more about you, Chili, where can they find more?
If you want to see more of what I'm up to, you can hit me up on my website, workbench.com, or you can check me out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Just search Orwood Solutions. How about you?
You can find more of me. I mostly live at craftybeatrut.com and at YouTube, Crafty Beetroot. And I just uploaded another video, which depending on when this goes out, was about a week ago or 2 weeks ago. But yeah, this one here finally got its video. It's day in the, and I'm talking about my watercolor painting box. Yeah, it was funny. I was editing the video and I realized I never actually recorded an ending for that video. So I had to come out and quickly record an ending. So, but yeah, it was interesting because I got back into doing that video editing. I'm like, oh, maybe I could edit together those other videos that I've got sitting there. I'll just come out to the workshop and build other useless things. So
excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing you next time and discussing what's on your workbench.